Coming at you live from all over Ohio. A Cleveland Browns podcast full of laughs, rants, fun, and stats. A place where all Browns fans' voices are welcome and heard. A show that aims to inform and entertain you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Barking Browns Show.
What is up, everybody? Welcome in. It's episode 99 of the Barking Browns Show. I'm Jacob. That's Nick. We're brought to you, as always, by our friends over at Homage Apparel. Nick's celebrating the Cavaliers, who are close to potentially, maybe, kind of could lock up home court advantage tonight for the first round of the playoffs. We'll see. It's not
Just
going.
The lead, 58.
There we go. I bring it up. We take the lead. We go in there. I got the classic Cleveland Browns Brownie the Elf shirt. Go check out Homage for best apparel business in the game. Buddy, it's a Tuesday. We are just fumbling right through our words, man. How are you doing tonight?
Oh man, you know what? I've been having a ton of fun. A little baseball, a little basketball, and I'm really excited to come back and bring it to football, because all of a sudden the calendar turns to April. Yeah, we're fumbling today. That's okay. The calendar's turned to April. It's draft month. I'm excited. I love the draft. I don't care how high the Browns pick or don't pick. It's fun, you know, and it's a reminder that slowly but surely the NFL's coming back. And on top of that, we're one away from our triple digit episodes, which I don't know where that time went, but Jacob, this is I love it. I can't wait for 200.
We're closing in on 200, which is amazing, guys. We appreciate you so much for taking some time to check us out today. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up. Helps us a lot in the YouTube algorithms. Right off the bat, I dropped a slot corner video on the YouTube channel. You can go check that out if you haven't already. Drop that over the weekend. Some 4 players I really, really like. Nick participated in how the running backs room may shake out with Kyle and Zach. You can go Tyler and Zach. I got our guest on standby in the back of my head, and so I threw his name there in there. You can go check that out. Tyler also dropped his first draft video of the year, and that will be up at that's the wide receiver prospects part 2, as I had done wide receiver prospects 3 months ago.
I learned the good word of Deuce Vaughn, courtesy of Tyler. And so if you're interested in that type of content, that's the video to go to.
Tyler's like really crazy about Deuce Vaughn, and I like Deuce Vaughn, and we'll talk about them. We got some running back stuff coming up in this show, and I also got a running back video coming up with Casey Kinnaman coming out on Friday. I'm doubling down on draft videos here through the rest of the cycle. So Friday, Casey Kinnaman and I will sit down and we'll talk about some running back prospects. Then I'll have Cleveland Browns mock draft 7.0 up on Sunday, trade up edition. Trade up. I go up to pick 55 to target a player that you may be surprised that I go up to get. And I did. I went and got him. We're going to talk some drafts. So we're going to bring a friend of mine. We've recently started interacting somewhat on Twitter, and he was, and I understood he was a little hurt. We did a mock draft without him, and I completely understood it. I said, well, we got to make up for this. So let's get it back here on this week. So and I learned how to say his name. You ready for this? Watch this. Got this. Watch this. Gonna bring in your friend, my friend, Kyle Lindemann. What's up, dude?
Boom. You did well. 10 out of 10. Doing great, man. We're 23 days from the NFL draft. So I think everybody's getting excited. It's kind of my favorite time of year. You know, football's kind of coming, but not there yet. But
yeah. It's close enough that we can smell it and that the weather's nice, because you can suffer through the nice weather months without football. It's that like February, January, like when your team's out of it and that sort of thing. You're just like, oh God, you can't even look at the weather to make you feel better.
Yeah, I had my kids outside today, and I think they were looking around. They're like, what's this rare phenomenon you speak of called the sun?
You know what? We were talking, Jacob and I were talking pre-show, and there's been years in Browns past where the draft was just so important, and kind of the Cavs and baseball was just in a down spot. So it just felt like it took forever to get to actual draft day. And this time I feel like we're kind of lucky. All of a sudden it's April, and I'm like, okay, you know, we can do this. It's really weird to have so much less pressure on the draft as a Browns fan, I think.
You don't have to go out and draft 7 starters like we normally do. Our friend Josh is hanging out. What's going on, Josh? I fumbled the ball. Yeah. You know what's funny? You put on there. I don't know why you picked number 13, but I did wear number 13 in junior high. I switched to number 6 in high school, but I wore number 13 because a little bit of trivia for you. My favorite player growing up was Kurt Warner. So I wore the 13 in baseball too. I wore it and then I switched to 39 because I was a Reds fan at the time, and I liked Aaron Harang. So there you go. There's some stuff, guys. We got a couple of things. We're gonna dive right into some draft stuff right off the bat. I want to talk about Mike Woods tearing his Achilles this morning. Not this morning, but the news coming out that he tore his Achilles. I thought he was gonna make the 53. And it always makes me sick when that sort of thing happens, especially in the offseason when someone his season's over, and it's like, man, that's just terrible. So it kind of hurts, but I think if you were on the fence, and I kind of was about if they were going to go draft a wide receiver, not necessarily with their first pick, but I was kind of on the fence after Marquise Goodwin that they draft one at all. Because they've got like 14 of them on the roster right now. And, they get Elijah Moore, something we'll get Kyle's opinion on the Elijah Moore thing a little bit later on in the show. But I kind of think that if you were out on a wide receiver for the Browns, I think you kind of need to be back in on that. And I'll start with you, Kyle. Do you think are you kind of in agreement with that? Or do you think it was always a wide receiver was coming in the draft?
Well, I mean, they got 8 picks, right? So
yeah,
kind of gets a little bit harder when you get in the later parts of the draft. I mean, you can't necessarily really draft for need at that point. You're just drafting best and playable player. And like, if that guy happens to be a receiver, I don't know if Anthony Schwartz will make the roster for year 3. So
I don't think so. I don't think so. Nick, what do you think?
It's a pretty deep receiver class. Like, it's not like we don't have a Jamar Chase. We don't have maybe even a Garrett Wilson, but like there's a lot of good day 2, even day 3 guys that I like.
Yeah, the way I said it, exactly how I said it. Top heavy, no. Deep, yes. Like you can get some players that can play. Nick, what do you got? You kind of in that same thought process?
So from a Mike Woods perspective, I'm frustrated because he had the hamstring issue last year, which really felt like it killed the momentum that he had, obviously. And then now you're again in the season. We haven't even gotten to the draft, and so we're losing him. Which I guess optimistically, if Woods was going to pick a time to tear his Achilles, I guess it would be better to do it way before the season than during, in terms of a recovery standpoint. That's all I can hope for at this point. Yeah. But I do think Jacob, you have really shown me the light of Corey Kinnan, and I've been following his mock drafts. And I remember when he mocked Tyler Scott to the Browns even after they signed Marquise Goodwin. So
yes, he did. Yeah, he loves Tyler Scott, and I did too.
And so you know what, I want to credit him, but I do think the Browns were going to draft a wide receiver. To me, it makes sense. I think to always keep taking shots on that position, and just the way Andrew Berry's kind of tried to build youth up in that room. I think it would make sense that they would.
They've drafted one every year. Yeah. So, okay. So now we're going to shift full-blown draft. Let's talk full-blown draft. I want to talk to you specifically, Kyle, about kind of a overall draft strategy from the way you think it should be ran, rather that's what some teams do or don't. And Nick, I'll get your opinion on this available as well. But like, it's always this like need versus best player available. Like, what do? Do you mix them together? I think best player available is so subjective because it's just different for everybody what you think. But in general, are you kind of a best player available guy, or do you try to like mix it together and that sort of thing?
Talking to me?
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
You know what? I think that I got to add the third element, and like you got to look at the contracts. So like, what players' contracts do you have expiring for the next year? How much money are you spending against the cap by position? Typically, like when you do roster construction, like you want to make sure your resources are put in like premium positions. So like when I look at premium positions, basically, players are going to spend a top 10 pick on or pay to be a very high player, highly paid player. It's, it's quarterback, it's wide receiver, it's left tackle, it's, edge rusher, corner. I mean, those are probably the 5. And then it kind of gets a little, you kind of work your way down from there. Those are typically the 5 spots you want to pay, those. I'll have to find the tweet, but I did a tweet that like went back the last 8 to 10 drafts that basically said number of players by position who were drafted in the top 10. And that was pretty interesting. And it was very heavily skewed to what I just said. Oh. So I think you look and see like who's coming off the books, how much are we spending on this? Is this guy a potential roster, cap casualty for next year? Do we need to maybe get a backup,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's that is a good, I'm going to write that down.
The Browns are spending $30 million just on 2 guards. And granted, they're the best guards in the NFL. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And they're very important to what we do on offense, especially with Nick Chubb. But like at the end of the day, it's still a very large chunk of your cap.
Yeah. And Wyatt Teller's play has been a little bit of a roller coaster the last couple of years.
He's definitely struggled with injuries, which has been a difficult part of it. But Kyle, that's really good info, man. You know what? I followed Kyle for a long time on Twitter, and so it's really cool that you're here and talking about this now. But for a good while, I have felt smarter from reading your draft tweets and that kind of thing. So I'd love to go back and look at that. It's I guess I'm really happy. You know what? A lot of people complain about the way the Browns prioritize positions, but if overall the NFL is moving towards this trend, I would rather be on that train and the way that Andrew Berry operates than still spending top picks in places that they don't need to. So it's nice to see that the Browns are following along with that rather than deviating as we've seen a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the 5 highest cap hits for 2024, and keep in mind, this could change because they can move money around. But the 5 highest players under the salary cap for the Browns in 2024 is Watson, Miles, Amari, Ward, and Njoku. So it's like 4 of those 5 are premium spots.
And you could very well see it shift around and be another premium spot kind of thing, especially with I think Cooper could potentially come off the books, but and Elijah Moore potentially he can't be re-signed till next offseason because he needs 1 more year. But yeah, I'm a big, you're going to learn that if you don't know this already, but I'm a really very big Elijah Moore guy. He was my favorite player in that draft. So we now have 2 in 2021 and 2022. Jacob's biggest draft crushes are on the Cleveland Browns now. Last year it was Alex Wright. The year before it was Elijah Moore, and they are now both in Cleveland. A little bit. Elijah Moore did a little bit of a little do-si-do before he got here, but you know what? Who gives a shit? So that's where.
Well, that was a bad situation.
Yeah,
and I tweeted about that last year, and the Jets fans were so mad at me when he requested a trade. I said, "Look, this has nothing to do with Elijah Moore's character. It tells us everything we need to know about Zach Wilson."
Zach Wilson and Mike LaFleur.
And like being someone who played receiver, like I didn't play in college, but like growing up and playing in high school, like when you're a wide receiver, the only way you feel like you're contributing to the team is when you get the ball. So like I speak for every wide receiver out there. If you don't get the ball, like you just don't feel like you're contributing. And yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean Elijah Moore is perfect, but like it was just a terrible situation for him. So like it was just smart that the Jets sold high on him too.
And you know what, Moore, it's not like Moore didn't prove that he could be a contributor, right? Like he had a really nice stretch of games his rookie season. I think it was
every time Zach Wilson wasn't playing.
Right. And so I get it why he would be frustrated. Like you've shown you belong at the NFL level. You were a 2nd round pick. Obviously the Jets invested a significant asset in you and you want to contribute. So I don't know, especially with the way that this whole Zach Wilson saga has gone. Like I don't blame Elijah Moore in the least.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's start with this next point. I want us to talk about some of our favorite prospects. So we're each going to give 2. We'll go in around. I'll start with Kyle and then Nick and myself. We'll do 1 apiece and then we'll go back around. and do a second one. Guys, if you're checking us out on YouTube or Facebook and you want to comment your favorite prospects, throw that stuff in there. We will talk about your favorite prospects too. I love that shit. So throw it in there and we'll get there. And I want to put this caveat on here because I put this in the rundown for the guys to prepare for this show. I said, it doesn't have to be a first round talent. Could be a day 3 guy, could even be a borderline UDFA. I don't care. If he is one of your 2 like really favorite prospects just because you like something about his game or you like his fit in Cleveland, whatever, I don't care. Just 2 guys you want to talk about, and we're going to start there. So Kyle, I will give you the floor.
I mean, I'm trying not to take some layups here and just go for like clear, easy round 1 guys.
Right.
So I'll stay out of the top 10 just to make it a little more challenging. But I would say for me, one, and this really isn't a need for the Browns, but I would say Darnell Washington, the tight end from Georgia. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's 6'7", 264 pounds. He's got almost 35-inch arms. He's got 11-inch hands. He's basically like having a third tackle on the field. And, you know, he had kind of limited production, but he was probably playing with the best college tight end in the last 4 or 5 years in Brock Bowers. So they didn't need, they needed Washington to block. They didn't need him to go out and run routes because they literally had the college version of Travis Kelce out there. So I really like Washington. I mean, especially for tight ends, tight end is a tough transition. I mean, we look at David Njoku and, it's funny because everybody ripped the Browns a year ago when they paid Njoku all that money, but they actually were ahead of the curve. Like that contract looks good now. And, it takes probably 3 years sometimes for these guys to find it because when you're a tight end, you're kind of an offensive lineman, you're kind of a receiver, and you're kind of, you have to do so many things. So what I like about Washington is I feel like he's kind of almost plug and play year 1. Like he's a guy that he can just come out there and he's a freaking bulldozer. This guy is just a freak. So I really like him. Going down my list here, I would say my number 2 guy. I don't want to say JSN. I feel like that's too easy, but I love Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think he's gonna be so good. I would say Zay Flowers, kid from Boston College for me. He's a receiver. Probably not going to be there when the Browns pick. He's only 5'9". He measured in at like 5'9", 174, but like he plays really bigger than his size. He kind of does a lot of things. He's really versatile. And I think one of the things I look for with these college receivers is try to look for a college receiver who didn't necessarily have a good offense or didn't necessarily have a good quarterback, because that's like the biggest way to find a guy that no one's talking about. Because it's like, as a receiver, and this goes back to Elijah Moore, like if your quarterback sucks, as a receiver, you can only do so much. Like you're completely dependent on the guy. So, and Zay Flowers isn't necessarily an unknown name. You're probably going to go back into round 1, maybe round 2. But I really, really like his game. I think he's going to be a good player.
Yeah, I liked Zay Flowers a lot before they gave up 42. That was definitely a name that I was like, yeah, if we can get that to drop to 42, which I don't think he probably won't. He probably won't drop that far. But that was one of those situations. I was like, you know what? If you can find your way down there, I'm not going to complain too much. Nick, you're up. What you got?
Okay, so I gave you a little bit of a preview, but the more I've learned about Tyler Scott, the more I you know what, I'm going a little bit more Browns needs. That's kind of like my vein of thought. But if there's anything that I've learned from the last few years of Browns football, it's just that they constantly find themselves in a situation where they just don't have a field stretcher. I don't know how it keeps happening. They keep trying to fix the need. And so like Marquise Goodwin is a fair Band-Aid to that problem, but he's not a long-term answer. And I know Elijah Moore is a guy that's going to help you a lot in that area, but I think the Browns don't just need 1 or 2 answers there. You want a wide receiver room full of guys that can be dynamic threats for you and be field stretchers. So I know Tyler Scott's not the biggest guy, but that's not really what you currently need in the wide receiver room. I just think you need additional weapons. You got a guy who is a tremendous athlete. I think he scored 9 touchdowns in his last year at Cincinnati, and just somebody that has proven to be a weapon. I think especially now, with not that they're the same type of wide receiver, but with Mike Woods going down, it pushes that a need to continue to add in the wide receiver room all the more. So it makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not positive if that's going to line up for the Browns, but I certainly would very much like it.
But I mean, I'll say this: if he's there, if Tyler Scott's at 74, I got no problem. I got no problem taking Tyler Scott at that situation. What's your number 2, Nick?
Oh, number 2 is one we've talked about, and so I'm just going to keep, as Tyler has continued to beat the Deuce Vaughn drum, I am going to continue with the Roschon Johnson drum, because I want number 1, another running back in the room who is bigger. I mean, he's 6'2", right? A guy who is definitely, like, I think Chubb's 5'10", something like that.
He's somewhere around that.
I would love to see the Browns continue to add to the running back room. I liked Jerome Ford a lot, and I'm excited to see what he's got this year. But I think really behind Chubb, there's more questions than there are answers currently, especially with Hunt floating out there. So you know what? We've talked about this a lot before, but Andrew Berry's shown, with paying Njoku, like you were talking about, Kyle, and with a guy like Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's shown a habit of the production doesn't always have to be there set in stone. He sees potential and drafts on it. And I think, when you're playing behind a guy like Robinson in Texas, you're just not going to get the type of opportunities. And so I like that, because I think his talent could fall because he doesn't have the concrete numbers that he would have if there was more opportunity. So I could see that being a situation where Andrew Berry's like, the value's too great to pass up. And then suddenly you've got two rookie contracts in your running back room. And I think that's a really good place to be.
Well, especially as Kyle pointed out at the beginning of the show, talking about where they are in contracts, there's a good chance that we have to have a hard conversation about Nick Chubb next offseason. I don't know. I know. But that's when that conversation at least begins, where you kind of got to have that. And so Roschon Johnson, I'm doing some running backs, but Roschon Johnson's on that group when we'll talk about running backs later in this show, and we'll talk about running backs in a different show as well, and we'll get through all that stuff and all that great stuff. Number 1 for me is Carl Brooks. I just love Carl Brooks out of Bowling Green at D tackle. He can also slide out and play over the tackle and even outside the tackle as an edge rusher. He's 300 pounds and he moves really, really well. He's got some of my favorite, like when you watch his hands, just violent hands. He just comes in clubbing people, just knock him out of the way, I just think that he's got a really nice first step. He's really aggressive in the pass rush. He needs a little bit of improvement as a run defender, but he's got the size and all the tools. So I think Carl Brooks at the top of the list for me, just because I've done a lot of work on a lot of defensive tackles, and he just feels like a value kind of guy. Like you could go 3rd, 4th round, somewhere in there. He's probably there. He comes from a smaller school, so you got to do a little bit of projection. But I think that's okay. And I think that he's a really good player that I think would fill a role immediately, but fill a long-term, he could be a long-term starter. Second one for me is Dorian Williams, the linebacker from Tulane. Dude just plays with his hair on fire. He just sideline to sideline, ranges all over the place. He could play coverage, has some decent pass rush moves if you want to blitz him. But he's just almost 100 solo tackles last year for Tulane. And I'm looking for a dude that can make tackles, not miss tackles. And if the new D tackle room is already looking like it can keep them a little bit cleaner, I just need a guy that can fly in and make hits in the running game and not let running backs float out for 30 yards out of the backfield on some pass plays and that sort of thing. And I think Dorian Williams' athleticism and his ability paired with JOK's athleticism and ability, I think creates a really fun duo. And as a result, that's kind of where I sit, where I think Dorian Williams would be fun.
I'll never forget, when the Browns played the Chargers, I was also facing Austin Eckler in fantasy. And that was a painful day for me. So if the Browns could draft guys that will help against just not get completely torched against running backs, that would be great.
Yeah, that'd be a little bit. Let's move to the running back conversation. Kyle, I know I'll ask you this straight. do you believe depth, that's where they're adding? Are they going to, do you think you'd rather a veteran? Do you think they go to the draft? And if it is the draft, give me some guys, that you like. Oh, you're muted.
I think it depends on your flavor.
Okay.
What kind of running back do you want? Do we want a pass catching specialist? Someone in the mold of Devin Achane, he's only 5'9", 188, kind of would be an outlier, but like he gives me some of those Chris Johnson vibes that this dude is just like lightning fast. I mean, this guy can fly. We're talking about like a track star, like 100-meter champion at Texas A&M. But he's not really going to run in between the tackles. He's not going to pass block. So I really like Israel Ibanaconda from Pittsburgh. I actually know his agent, and he is only 20. He's not going to be 21 till the fall. So he really only started for 1 year in college. Like he's got a ton of tread on those tires. So I'm not one of those people that tries to poo-poo age when it comes to prospects, like because COVID had such a significant impact on the 2020 college football season that a lot of these guys are not coming out after 3 years because especially the guys that were going to play in 2020 either got set back. So we're seeing a lot of guys now, especially with the NIL, going to college for 4 or even 5 years. So just because the prospects may be 22, 23, I know Andrew Barry loves his, he's kind of like Leonardo DiCaprio. He loves his 21-year-olds, but so I don't think that matters so much for position, but like as far as running back goes, like you only get so much tread on the tires. So I do like Ibanaconda. The guy I really can't make up my mind on is Sean Tucker out of Syracuse. He's kind of more of a north-south runner, kind of like Chubb. He's kind of a bigger back. He's like 5'9", 207. He didn't participate at the combine because he had an injury. He might be a guy, Tank Bigsby from Auburn. He's 21. He's 6 foot, 201. He was really, really highly recruited. I mean, this guy, we were talking about this guy 3 years ago. Like everybody was excited and he never really kind of panned out. I could see maybe them going for somebody like him, maybe in the later rounds. Probably Jahmyr Gibbs, Charbonnet, Roschon Johnson. Those guys are probably going to be off the board. I've been hearing really, really good things about Roschon.
Yeah.
And he's kind of a bigger back. He kind of fits. I think he maybe fits with our offense a little bit better. But there's a ton of guys this year. So I think round 4, that kind of seems to be the sweet spot.
Kyle, my heart hurts hearing that because I really thought that the Browns might get a shot at Roschon, and so you saying that he might be gone, I'm hurting.
Yeah, he's really rising up the draft boards.
Okay,
and he's not super fast. He didn't really jump out of the gym, but like running backs have gotten a lot smaller. So I think because of how much the NFL's changed, so. Some of these guys that can run between the tackles, that can pick up a third and 1 goal line running back. Like I feel like those guys are actually probably a little bit more valuable now than maybe they were 5 years ago because we just don't have him. Like we kind of take Nick Chubb for granted, but most teams don't have that. They don't have Nick Chubb. They don't have Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Real quick, I see some of the other comments about some guys, and we're gonna grab those here in just a second. But this question did come in as related to the topic. And I'll start with you, Kyle. But would you take Hunt back on the cheap?
I don't know. It almost kind of felt like sour grapes. Like I don't know if he lost a step or if I felt like he sandbagged us. I've never seen a running back sandbag a season like he did last year because he just didn't want to get hurt. And I had him on so many of my fantasy teams. It's like, oh yeah, I'm getting this dude in the 8th round. His production will be close to Chubb's. This is great. He'll be my running back too, and he sucked. Yeah.
This was the first year that I feel like Hunt really wasn't up to that level of production, right? Like I know 2 years ago he tied Kamara for the running back lead in touchdown receptions. It's like my favorite stat. And even 2 years ago, 3 years ago, time flies. But my point is, the last year with Baker Mayfield, he was still productive when he wasn't hurt, right? And there was a span where Jacob and I talked about on this show that Hunt might have been playing as the better of the two running backs, I think. And then all of a sudden last year, it really nosedived. Like this was the first, Chubb gets over 300 carries, and it was just weird to see it goes so much more lopsided, Chubb to Hunt, whereas like normally it's been balanced in the past.
Yeah, I'm out on Kareem Hunt. I mean, I just the trade, and then this, I agree with Kyle sandbagging the season. There's just a lot there where I'm just like, there's no market for him clearly, or he would have signed already. Yeah. But we're also seeing, I think, the effects of this running back class on free agency, where people's like, they're not paying for running backs like Kareem Hunt because they can go draft someone, they can go draft A-Chain, they can go draft Roschon Johnson, they can go draft, I'm trying to think of some of the guys that I have on later in the rounds, but you can go and draft a dude on day 3 that I think can be your backup.
Ty Spears, that's another name.
Ty Spears, that's what it is. Yep, I love Ty
Not
Spears.
you, but I'm saying that our viewers need to know. I would say maybe some of these veteran running backs haven't signed because they're waiting to see what teams do in the draft.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very well. Yeah. I think sometimes with the Kareem Hunt thing, I think that we get a little nostalgic about it more so than
has there ever been, somebody who made one bad decision in the heat of the moment who lost as much as Kareem Hunt did?
Yeah.
It's sad when you think about it. Not that I condone what he did, but like, this guy should still be on the Chiefs.
Yeah, he'd have 2 Super Bowls.
And he probably would have got paid.
I just want to pick both of your brains. Would it surprise you at all if Jerome Ford was just our running back 2 in 2023?
No. I think they really liked him. I liked him too. I just think my thing is I haven't seen enough. Like if I'd seen more of him last year, I think I would feel better about it. I just don't think, especially too, like, I think Nick Chubb is like one of the best human beings that's probably ever played for the Browns. He's just awesome. You literally can't ask for a better person. And like, he's probably one of my all-time favorite Browns, but he's been in the league for 5 years. So unfortunately, most running backs are good for 7 years and then they go. And Barry seems to be the kind of GM that he'll let you go a year early rather than a year late. So I know it's not something Browns fans want to hear, but we're kind of getting a point where, you kind of want to make sure you got insurance behind Chubb.
Yeah. That's just the sad reality.
It is. Yeah. And I like Jerome Ford. I liked him a lot when they picked him, liked him a lot coming out in that class. It looks like I dropped my phone and split the screen in the middle of it. Oh, that's cool. The light just caught a big crack across the center of my phone screen, and I just discovered that. So, I'm with you. I like Jerome Ford coming out a lot. I thought he has a lot of Kareem Hunt in his game, and some of his running styles, and we talked about that last year when they took it. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is Kareem Hunt's replacement. Like, it was pretty clear to me then, like, that he does a lot of the things that Kareem Hunt does, and they're going to let Kareem Hunt walk, and people still wanted to argue with me. And I'm just like, I get it, but like, the writing's on the wall here. They're not going to pay them with Deshaun Watson's contract season. They're not paying 2 running backs anymore. Yeah. And then he ends up going and having the season that he has, where he just looks uninspired and uninterested. And it is what it is. Real quick, we got several comments and questions over talking about some prospects that they like and that they want us to discuss. But real quick, we're going to take our only break of the episode, step away real quick, and just hear from our friends at BetStamp. What's up, guys? Today's podcast is brought to you by our friends over at the BetStamp app, which is helping thousands of people win at sports betting, and it's absolutely free. The same way travelers use things like Google Flights, Expedia, and other websites to find the best prices, bettors can now use the BetStamp app to do the same for sports betting. When you place a bet, the odds given by a sportsbook will determine how much you could possibly win. Even when betting on the same outcome, different sportsbooks will offer varying payouts, and those differences can be pretty big. Thankfully, BetStamp allows you to easily line shop for the most profitable odds across all the major sports books. You can click on any matchup and instantly see all the different odds from game lines, player props, and even futures bets. Line shopping is the simplest way to find an edge in sports betting and maximize your chances of winning long term. On average, BetStamp users win an extra $1,000 a year just by line shopping. For example, March Madness is tipping off. You want to make sure you're going to have all the tools needed to cash in on your predictions. The tournament is filled with exciting upsides, and BetStamp will connect you with the best possible odds for every pick you make. You can find the BetStamp app in the Apple iOS Store, Google Play Store, or through your browser at www.betstamp.app. To access all these benefits, sign up using our promo code Network216, all one word, no space between network and 216, and start your journey to successfully sports betting today. If you forget to use the code upon sign up, you can always enter our code in your BetStamp account settings afterwards. So go check it out and let's make some money. You know what my favorite part is? When I forget how to say the word upset and I say upsites. I could re-record it, but I haven't. Here we are. All right, moving right along into that situation. Okay, a running back question that came up here. Oh, Casey's got one. Casey's got a good one for you, Kyle. You asked, has there ever been a running back who made one mistake that ruined his career more than Kareem Hunt, and he beat you? It's Ray Rice.
Yeah, for sure. Good point.
Ray Rice ended his career.
Yeah. Well, so, yeah.
I forgot about it
again. Did he?
Yeah. And do you remember though? Like the Browns flirted with bringing him into Cleveland. There was like these rumors for a long time that Ray Rice was coming to Cleveland, and I don't know how true those were. And that's been so long ago. I was, I don't remember. But like, yeah, I didn't think about that. You made the Kareem Hunt thing, and I was like, yeah. And then he's like Ray Rice, and I'm like, oh, he got you.
He's right. Good.
He got us on that one. Josh, a big Youngstown State guy, and he talks about Jaleel McLaughlin, the running back. Have you watched much of him, Kyle? I've got a little bit. I've got some notes on Jaleel McLaughlin from Youngstown State.
I haven't been as well versed on the. He's what, FCS, right?
Yeah.
I haven't been as much on the FCS guys, unfortunately.
I like Jaleel because there were some rumors that they might target him. Actually, there were some Browns links to him. The thing that jumps out about him is his return ability. Like he steps on the field and he's an electric returner, which is kind of like what can he do for you potentially out the gate, and returning is he was really good in open space, an athletic player. Good short area quickness. He's got track level speed.
Jaleel McLaughlin.
Yes.
I'm trying to see what I can find on him.
I have you guys, Jacob, you bring up returner, and so it's making the gears turn in my brain. Do you think that the Mike Woods injury makes it more likely for Jakeem Grant to make the team this year?
I think it's his best shot.
Okay.
I definitely do. I tweeted that today. I said, when I tweeted out my story about Mike Woods' Achilles, I do think this, because I didn't have Jakeem Grant making the roster. Well, I had him and Felton battling it out with a rookie if they kept 7. Like if they kept 7, he was potentially battling out for that 7th.
Okay.
That's my opinion. Kyle, anything on Jakeem Grant?
No, I mean, it's the wide receiver room filled up quick. I mean, he's supposed to be, he's kind of supposed to be the special teams guy. So we'll see how he does. I mean, it's kind of sad after years of watching Phil Dawson and Josh Cribbs. Like, we had some of the 2 best special teamers ever. And the NFL is really kind of starting to phase special teams out. If you watch the XFL, like how they do the kickoffs, like why does the NFL not do that? I mean, it's awesome.
So fun.
Like the kickoff, like I get it. It was a violent play, and they need to protect the players. But man, kickoffs are always so fun. Like how about that Josh Cribbs return where like he almost went out of bounds against the Steelers, and he was like doot 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 doot, and then like somehow broke that for a touchdown. That was insane.
And that was right after they had lost the lead. Like Pittsburgh goes down and scores, kicks off, we get the lead back. It was like,
There was like that era of Josh Cribbs and Devin Hester was such a it was always exciting. I loved it. I feel like every weekend you'd turn on SportsCenter and it would either be Josh Cribbs or Devin Hester. Somebody housed a kickoff, and I used to love that. I miss that element of the game.
A side note on McLaughlin. Oh, go ahead.
For how much as the league loves parity, you would think they would want it, because an inferior team with maybe good special teams might be able to overcome. Maybe the Browns with Josh Cribbs would have had a better shot of beating the Patriots.
a huge part of the Bears Super Bowl team was Devin Hester because their offense and
because Rex Grossman, it was Rex Grossman,
yeah, but Devin Hester, man, their defense would play well and they'd just rack up touchdowns on special teams.
That Bears team was one of my favorites because there were a lot of games where they would go into halftime and Rex Grossman had completed more passes to the other team. and like he would go in with like 3 interceptions and 2 completions and they'd be winning by 12. You're like, what? And Urlacher being great. Real quick though, back on to finish up my thought, Josh, for McLaughlin. Finishes with 4,010 total yards and 32 touchdowns at Youngstown State. Like I said, great speed. Yeah, I'm fine with it. If you're taking a 7th round, 6th round running back, I think he's there, or he can go UDFA. But I just wanted to get that in because Josh is one of our favorites, and he had a good point. Gervin Dexter, Parker Washington, Derek Hall, Caleb weighs in with those 3 guys as 3 of his favorite prospects. Gervin Dexter, that's actually a good segue, Kyle, because I'd love to ask you about Gervin Dexter. I am so confused about Gervin Dexter's tape because he's got all the physical tools in the world out of Florida and played in the, he's just physically, athletically, he's a borderline freak style of prospect. But when I watched him, man, he disappears on tape a lot. Like there's a lot of stretches where you're like, are you sure Gervin Dexter's out there? Which or I think it's Jervon, my bad. I'm sorry. I think it is Jervon Dexter. But if you're looking at it from a standpoint where he's actually kind of slipped, because for a while they were talking about him in the 40s and he's kind of slipped closer to like 3rd round or so. If you're going into this draft feeling good about who you have at defensive tackle, if you're the Browns, and he's there on day 2, and especially if he slips to like 111, I mean, in terms of a guy with upside, I think he's got a ton.
Yeah, and he's a junior, right? 21.
Yeah.
So it kind of fits. I mean, we have to look at Barry's profile. I mean, as much as we don't want to, he has a type of guys that he likes. Who's the UK guy that always does? He does the salary cap. Why is his name slipping my brain?
Jack Duffin.
Yeah, he always puts out a good list of. I don't know if he has. I haven't talked to him in a little while, but he always puts out a good list of like guys that Barry will target, and it's usually spot on.
He's got it out. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, he did put it out.
I would say with Dexter, I mean, he was kind of a little slow getting off the line. I don't know if maybe that's something that can be fixed. That's probably why. He's probably disappeared a little bit on tape, but I think maybe it was a Florida thing too, because like Anthony Richardson had all the talent in the world, and I felt like it was a brand new coaching staff in Florida. So that's always tough because like they're trying to come in and it's not their guys that they recruited. So that's always tough. And so he maybe kind of got lost in the shuffle, kind of like Anthony Richardson did. And maybe they're just like, I don't like this coach. I'm out of here. I don't know.
That's the biggest thing for me is I'm just curious, is it just like an effort thing? Because if it's just an effort thing, I feel like you can coach that, like, because he's got the tools. Like you're not like, oh, he's not talented. So that's kind of where I'm. You know what? And I know Nick likes Parker Washington, the Penn State. I love Parker Washington just because I think he's like one of those. He's like an ultimate zone. Like he beats zone coverage really well, but he also has like some really great short area quickness. But Nick, I know you've talked a little bit about Parker Washington before. Is Parker Washington, as the Browns are looking potentially to add a wide receiver, is that somebody that you would be a fan of?
You know what? Yes. I have personally gone weapon crazy. I honestly, I thought for a long time, you know what, when the Browns have Odell and they have Jarvis and that type of offense, like and especially following the reports of what the Browns are going to change to offensively. When you're opening up the pass game, you're going to need more guys that can be reliable, consistent weapons. And I think that makes a lot of sense. You know what? And Kyle, you were talking about Jack's chart, which I was just looking at, and Parker's got the 2 green check marks that you're looking for. So I just, it makes sense as a target. And especially when, when they have so many picks right in that area where it's looking like Washington is getting mocked, I would not be surprised at all. Sign me up. You know what? David Bell was in they've drafted David Bell out of the Big Ten and wide receivers, and Parker Washington is as well. And I think that they do have and Donovan Peoples-Jones as well. They do seem to have some trends of guys that they draft. So I think Parker Washington fits into that too.
Yeah,
I'm worried about Bell. He was a guy that I really liked, and I think sometimes speed is a little bit overrated for receivers because you're running so much laterally. Like you've got to be able to beat press. You've got to, you got to identify the hole in the zone. I just think, what did he run last year? It was like a 4.68.
Yeah,
I think once you get over 4.6, man, that is really hard. But I think if a guy runs a high 4.5, it's probably not a big deal.
Yeah. I think Jordan Addison ran in the 4.5s, didn't he? Like or something like that. I was thinking, I always hate when I do this because
Bell ran a 4.65.
Didn't the Browns met with Jalen Hyatt, didn't they?
Yeah.
Did I see that?
Or they're set to meet with Jalen Hyatt, which
is the Saints were doing that too with Hendon Hooker, and everyone's like, they just signed Carr, and I thought they're just doing a recon mission because everybody's obsessed with Josh Heupel's offense.
Yeah.
And I think the Saints would be targeting Jalen Hyatt possibly because he's kind of a nice duo with Olave. So I just think the Browns are probably just trying to pick their brain.
Okay.
Well, and
or maybe the Browns are interested in Cedric Tillman, and maybe Jalen Hyatt will give them dibs on Cedric Tillman. I mean, who knows?
Well, and they met and I've heard Jake Burns talk about this. Like they met with Elijah Moore. They don't end up getting Elijah Moore till a little bit down the line. You could be meeting with these guys potentially to go after him in a few years. I mean, I think that's the way this front office looks at this sort of thing. I think they are always looking big picture. They're looking this year. They're definitely always looking this year. But I think they're also trying to set up a sustainability. Sustainable success is what I always say with this. At least what it appears from me on the outside looking in is what it appears that they're trying to do. I've got a couple of names here, Kyle. I want to pick your brain on this as we start to wrap this thing up because we're getting close to the end of this real quick. A guy I love a lot, and they've brought him in, and I don't know that they would have to potentially trade up and get him. But if he falls within striking range, they've traded up for a linebacker before. How do you feel about Trenton Simpson? Trenton Simpson from Clemson.
Is he a linebacker? Is he a safety? Is he a nickel? I think my concern is I don't know where this guy fits. And I feel like he's a physical specimen. I mean, he's got all the traits in the world. I think my concern is I feel like maybe he's not as instinctive enough. He's always seems like he's a step late to the ball. But he's an absolute freak, and which obviously you can't teach. I just feel like he maybe does a lot of things well, but does he do anything great? I don't know. He may fall out of the first round depending on what teams are looking for. So he's got all the physical tools in the world, but I don't know where this guy fits.
Yeah, and I mean, you saw Isaiah Simmons go really high and then it not kind of work out, and I think that hurt JOK for one, and it could hurt Simpson as well on the back end. Marvin Mims. Marvin Mims is a name. We love Marvin Mims on this show, especially the way he works out of the slot, which is crazy because as he's a smaller guy, but it's kind of similar to the way you described Zay Flowers. Marvin Mims can go and get the ball.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw his catch against Texas Tech. I did a video on Marvin Mims on Twitter. You can find it on my profile, or I can tweet it. But he had this crazy, like, over the back catch. This DB was like in his face, and it was like the DB's body was here, and he like caught the ball on the other side of the DB. Mm-hmm. He actually was lined out wide 68% of his snaps this year, and he averaged 20 yards a catch. And so, I mean, that's pretty impressive. I think sometimes the Big 12 receivers, those are hard guys to judge. Those are very hard guys to judge. I'm going back and forth so much on Quentin Johnson. I can't make up my mind. There's so much I like, so much I don't like. I think these guys, especially receivers in the Big 12, are kind of facing so much soft coverage that they're not maybe as like well versed to work the hard like underneath routes, maybe even against press. But I'm a Mims fan.
Yeah. What do you, Nick? You got any thoughts on Marvin Mims?
You know what? I don't. Marvin Mims is not somebody that I know a whole ton about yet, and I know that I should because Jacob, we've talked about it before, and so I'm still learning. I'm still like we've got like 3 more weeks, and by the time we get there, that's where I'm going to be. But well, slowly but surely.
So I mentioned him earlier, so I'll ask you how you feel about Dorian Williams from Tulane.
I think my only concern, maybe this guy's a little undersized, 6'1", 228. Is he heavy enough to be linebacker? Is he more, again, he's probably not as much of a safety. He ran a 4.49 at the combine, 33-inch vert, 10-inch broad. Not great, pretty good. It's kind of interesting how many guys from Tulane that I became interested in this year, and I don't understand their helmet, their colors, this like funky green end zone. I'm just like, oh my god, this is an abomination. Like, who designed? I don't know if you saw those one. It was literally like their uniforms was like a bad version of like the Grinch Stole Christmas. It was like red and green, and then there was like this light.
There was
blue.
like a teal helmet at one point.
Yeah, I was like, these colors do not, mesh. But yeah, I mean, he was team captain 3 years, 3-year starter. So I think, teams like him. He didn't necessarily do the best against Kansas State, but kind of curious to see where he ends up.
He feels like he probably, I think he's somewhere around the back end of round 3, early round 4 for some reason. I it's where I think he's at, but I mean, he could go earlier. He could go, because I think after Dorian Williams, it gets to like Ivan Pace, and then the linebacker class just kind of completely falls off the face of a cliff. And that's even if you even like Ivan Pace, because Ivan Pace is very small. So you talk about Dorian Williams being a little undersized. So is Ivan Pace. I mean, you're talking about both of those guys, and so you're looking at them. I just wanted to shout out Josh for his $2 super like there.
Thank you, Josh.
Appreciate you, my friend. We're always happy to have you here.
We were thrilled to see that you won our latest giveaway, and we got some more planned coming up. So thank you to everybody that's been so supportive of us. We've since we crossed that 1,000 subscriber mark on YouTube, it's really turned the corner, and we've been growing quickly. And so I can't say thank you enough.
And real quick before we wrap this up, Kyle, thoughts on Elijah Moore?
I love him. I mean, like I said, he's a guy that had all the metrics, kind of everything you want coming out, proven production, in a Power 5. I mean, he was just electric. And he's versatile too. You can kind of put him out wide. You kind of put him in the slot. He's kind of a mismatch. He should do well with Watson. So I think he's a guy kind of needed a fresh start. So, I mean, I think it was a haul. I mean, when the report came out, I thought we gave up a second and a third, and I was like, oh man. But then when I found out all we did was swap a second for a third, I'm like, and I think the Jets had to do it because they're having a hard time getting this Aaron Rodgers deal done. So from what intel I've got is, what did the Jets pick? 13. And they don't want to give up 13 for Rodgers because I think they're targeting a tackle there. Because, Mekhi Becton played one game the last 2 years, and they got Dwayne Brown on the other side, who's like 37. So, like, they're going to bring in Rodgers. They need a tackle. So, I think what the Jets are trying to do is kind of get ammo for the Rodgers trade, and I think Barry kind of saw it, kind of pounced on it. I mean, he's such a smart guy, so I feel like he like sniffed that out. He's like, hey, I mean, the Jets need ammo for Aaron Rodgers. Maybe I can get Elijah Moore away from him, and he did.
2 years in a row of being opportunistic to get a wide receiver that you very much needed. First Amari Cooper and now Elijah Moore. That's the type of stuff that really makes me believe in Andrew Berry, because I don't think we've seen those type of savvy moves from really any other Browns GMs that I can remember. So I love that type of stuff. And it's obviously you're never going to hit all your draft picks. And I know there's a lot of opinions out there on Andrew Berry, but I just love the ability to make up for some of his mistakes with these types of moves.
Yeah, I mean, he just seems like a genuine, like, down-to-earth person, and obviously so smart. Worked under Howie Roseman. I don't think he did for very long, but I think, in my opinion, Howie Roseman's the best general manager in the league.
Okay.
I think maybe what I wish Barry was a little bit better at was maybe just a little bit of the drafting. I just feel like, like every year PFF loves the Browns draft, and I'm all for analytics. I think analytics is great. There's a spot for it. I just feel like, football is such a tough physical sport. I feel like the Browns just don't have enough dogs on the roster. Like just guys that are just want to get in the trenches and just like hit somebody. I feel like we don't have that enough. You know what I mean? That kind of like chutzpah behind the team. And I mean, you kind of need that in the AFC North, right? I mean, it's such a physical, division. So I think maybe I feel like sometimes they get too caught up in the metrics, like I trust the data. I trust how a guy measures at the combine, but there's certain players that they just wow you with their tape. And it's just like, you know what, this guy's production is so good. I'm just, I'm not going to focus so much on his 40 time because I just think he's a football player.
I tweeted this out right after the Browns traded for Elijah Moore because something I noticed immediately when I was watching him play, he plays with such like F you, I'm Elijah Moore attitude. I love that about him. I don't think the Browns, Nick Chubb's a quiet guy. Amari Cooper's a quiet guy. Donovan Peoples-Jones isn't like a huge personality. But like when Elijah Moore makes good plays, he is in your face.
He's going to let you know about it.
Yeah, he is going to let you know. And I love getting that type of personality on the offense because, even Njoku's a big personality, but he's not that type of dude that's up in your face. And Elijah Moore very much is. I think, to your point, Kyle, that's a really good personality addition. I
just feel like the Browns need like 2 or 3 more of those guys. Like you don't want to have a whole locker room full of them, but like a couple more.
That's where I think the Al Woods, Big Al Woods is in town, and he's just a nasty. He's 36, but that dude could still play, man. Yeah. He's 36 and that's a big son of a gun right there. You just put him smack down, put him next to Dalvin Tomlinson. He can play the 1, Dalvin can play the 3, and let's go from a historically bad run defense to somewhere in the top half, top 15, somewhere in there, and just like that. Before we even go to the draft, and we go after some interesting names, and I got some interesting names.
I mean, I want to say it probably was a decade ago, but I remember when we were in the 3rd round and the Honey Badger was still on the board, Tyrann Mathieu. And like he had maybe some character issues and he wasn't the biggest guy. I think he was only like 5'9.5" or 5'10", and he was kind of undersized and people didn't know what to think about him. But I just like from watching him in college, it's like, man, this guy's a dog. Like he has such a nose for the ball. You can't teach that. You know what I mean? And I've always been a big Honey Badger fan. And of course, I think 1 or 2 picks before we took Leon McFadden. It was cornerback / safety, and the guy's out of the league in 2 years. And then the Honey Badger goes like 2 picks later. And I'm just like, oh my God, how does this keep happening?
Yeah, well, and you still, I think the one that gets me the most is the drafting Chad Thomas while Mark Andrews was on the board, having already drafted Baker Mayfield. You're just like, point. You know what?
I didn't even think about that. That's a great reference.
Like, why wouldn't you? And then Chad Thomas was so bad. For one, this is a true story. Chad Thomas gave Nick the finger.
He did.
Well, he gave everybody the finger, and Nick was in the crowd.
It was at a training camp, and Freddie had them running gassers. Which, looking back on it, since I've seen a bunch of Browns training camps, it's the only time I've ever seen that type of thing from our professional team. So they weren't having a good time, but Chad Thomas was clearly dragging. Like the rest of the Browns were done, and Chad's still just kind of casually jogging. So he got heckled from the crowd at camp, and
then he gave him the finger.
Yeah.
Wow.
Real quick.
I just have one more.
Yeah.
The Anthony Schwartz over Amon-Ra St. Brown hurts me immensely.
Well, but he's another guy. That's my point that I was getting to. That he's another guy that like he maybe didn't have the best metrics, so he wasn't the best tester. But like you turn on the tape and it's just like bam, bam, bam. This guy is just dominating.
Yeah, I do respect though that Amon-Ra St. Brown can tell you every wide receiver what pick and what school they went to that got picked before him, which is like that's a dog. You're talking about that's what that is.
And I think he's really changing the narrative of slot receivers too.
Yeah.
And I think Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to do that even more. I think he's just going to dominate from day one.
I'm really intrigued on where JSN goes.
Titans. That's the number one thing that I've heard, because they are kind of tearing this thing down because they realize, like, hey, we're in the AFC, like, we're not, like, we had a window, our team's getting older, you know, they kind of want to get out from Tannehill after this year, see what they can do to get a quarterback next year. So they're kind of just laying the foundation right now. So a lot of, from reports I've heard, is that Tennessee's going to take him at 11.
I heard there was a PFF mock where they went up for Richardson at 3.
Whoa.
Tennessee did.
Yeah, I would hate that because I love Vrabel, and he's obviously a great coach. I don't think that he's the kind of coach I want to develop a quarterback, because I just don't think he has the patience for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love Mike Vrabel, but like, he's perfect for the veteran team that he had. So for Anthony Richardson, I want him to go to like Carolina or even the Colts with Shane Steichen. So,
yeah.
But I think Seattle would probably be the perfect spot.
Yeah, you got Geno pretty cost effectively for the next couple of seasons, and it's just like, I did not. You know what? MC, we'll have words after this. MC, I see your comment. I see it. Real quick before we wrap this thing up, man, I'm so thankful to have had you on here and shared all your insight. If you're not following Kyle, please go follow him. Rectify that. Before we get out of here, please
put it in the chat, or can you put it in the chat?
Yeah, I can put it in chat. What do we need to put in the chat?
And Kyle, the floor is yours to tell them where to find you, what you do, the whole thing.
Yeah, so Kyle Lindemann, I'm actually an Ohio guy. I'm a Cleveland guy, so
Nice.
That's what kind of makes it cool. Fantasy analyst, NFL draft analyst, so do for this website called Rotoballer. Have my own YouTube channel, kind of getting more videos up, do some YouTube shorts, but got plenty of, stuff going out on Twitter every day. So if you're a hardcore football fan, I show my Browns colors, but sometimes on Twitter I kind of have to be neutral, but I'm always rooting for the Browns.
Yeah, I put your @ is in the comments, so if you guys want to look at that, that's his Twitter @ if you want to go,
I appreciate that.
Check all that stuff out over there. And Nick, you know what to do.
You know what? This has been episode 99. So we are officially at triple digits next week. Jacob and I are going to talk about how to properly celebrate that. I love celebrating.
Our 2-year anniversary is in like 3 weeks. Our 2-year anniversary. Yeah.
That's wow. It's been a hell of a ride. We're going to get a lot more into that on episode 100. I think we'll probably dedicate some time to.
We're gonna reflect on poor internet quality, me sitting way too close to the camera, and not realizing that the show is live.
Well,
yeah, you just got to start somewhere, though. That's what I tell people all the time. Just start.
That's why that's my advice too. I get people sometimes will be like, "How'd you get into sports journalism? How do you do it?" And I'm like, "Just do it. Go get a blog, find somewhere where you can freelance, and just do it."
You know what? This all started, Kyle, because Jacob DM'd me one day and he's like, "Hey man, I do this podcast with my friend, and he's a Giants fan. I'm a Browns fan, and because it was about Odell Beckham, and he's like, would you be interested in talking about Odell Beckham with us?" And I was like, "Yeah, dude, I'd love to do that." And it's all because Jacob DM'd me that day, and we just started talking, and all of a sudden it's like we enter every week with a loose little plan, and we just go. I don't know anything like it, man. I'm with you though. Just try.
So let's end with a little nugget of football history. So the Giants back in the day, the 50s, they actually had Vince Lombardi as their offensive coordinator, and they had Tom Landry as their defensive coordinator. But they had a different guy, I forget his name, that was the head coach, who was like pretty good, but like wasn't great. And like Lombardi wanted the Giants job, but like they wouldn't get rid of this other coach. And like a year later, the Giants lost Lombardi and Tom Landry, and they were and it's funny because like we think of the Giants as always like one of the best run franchises in the NFL. From like the early 60s until Bill Parcells, the Giants were terrible.
Don't let Isaac see this episode.
This has been episode 99 of the Barking Browns Show. I'm Nick. He's Jacob. That's Kyle. Go Browns.
Dolphins sleep with one eye open at all times. That is a scientific fact.